Hello, friends, and welcome to our Sunday streaming services. If you're with us on Facebook or YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to get notifications when we have new videos. If you're with us on Zoom, drop a hi in the chat. We'd love to say hello back to you. And if you're with us in the studio, if you're with us actually at church in the sanctuary, hello, everybody down there. I cannot wait to join you. And if this is your first time here, then go ahead and sign our guest book at oakcliffeu.org/guest. Today's sermon is Enlightenment with Beth Ferree. This is actually really fun because this sermon topic was auctioned off at our recent online auction. Pick the topic and they did. So the topic is Enlightenment. Lots of fun. I cannot wait to hear it. In honor of Beth, I have worn what I won from her at the auction, which is her amazing dragon fingerless gloves. These are even more beautiful in person. Seriously, there are such bright colors, but if I put bright lighting on, then my face just didn't work. So it was my face or the gloves. And sorry, Beth, I chose the face. So, but aren't these super cute? Next auction, make sure that you get you a pair of these. So much fun. All right, moving on to announcements. Number one, Kathy recovered our bench. Yay, bench. Love the bench. Save the bench. Thank you, Kathy. All right. If you are on a committee that needs money next fiscal year, now's the time to submit that request. Submit your budget to the board at board-relay@oakcliffeu.org and do that as soon as possible because they are putting together the budget for the parish meeting so that we can all vote on it. All right, other news. You can find details on all of these things on our e-blast. If you are not signed up for our e-blast, just head on over to our website, sign up, and you will get this weekly email that gives you all the goings on at our church. So here's a little sampling of what you will find. Updates on our ministerial search. Y'all, we are so close. It is really exciting. We have been working so hard. This is going to be great. Updates on our upcoming sci-fi and fandom convention. Ooh, I am really excited about that. It has been moved to June, just a note. Good times. Workday Wednesdays. Scott, show us some pictures of Workday Wednesdays. It is spring at our church, and we just have, our grounds are gorgeous. Show up, work on the grounds, experience some peace. It's so much fun. Love our grounds during the spring. Love our grounds all the time. We have a beautiful space. Lots of stuff about our upcoming parish meeting, including open vacancies, positions that need to be filled, descriptions of those. There is an amendment to the bylaws, maybe a couple of amendments. That's on there. Also, can you even vote? Have you submitted your pledge form? If not, you can find out how to do that in your e-blast. And finally, as always, there are widening the circle of concern updates. They are moving to Tuesday. So if you can join, go ahead and do that. It is good and important work. So thank you to everyone who is in this round. And thank you, Sherry, for always giving us such great updates every week. We really appreciate that. It is Sunday, so stick around afterwards. 11:15 is talkback. Whether you decide to talk or just sit around and listen, you always get something out of it. And we have adult religious exploration at 1 o'clock, science fiction and religion and philosophy. Fun topics. Member anniversaries. We have two very special anniversaries, so let's get right to it. Number one, happy UUCOC anniversary to Sarah Spencer Kenny. Woo! And also a very happy anniversary to Hazel Krupenbacher Thomas. Happy anniversary to you both. Thank you so much for being a part of our church. And to you and to everyone else out there, I hope that you have a very happy Sunday.
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Oak Cliff. Thank you for having the curiosity and courage to join us. We welcome you, whoever you are, whatever spiritual tradition, gender, age, race, sexual orientation, or background you may bring to our community. We hope you will find here comfort, connection, challenge, respect, and above all, love.
May the light we now kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of love, compassion, and forgiveness. Que esta luz que ahora encendemos nos inspire a usar nuestros dones y poderes para sanar y no para herir, para ayudar y no para impedir, para bendecir y no para maldecir, para servirte a ti, espíritu de amor, compasión y perdón.
There is Room for You Here by Mary Edis. If God is your strength and companion, and prayer the means of centering your thoughts, there is room for you here. If the teachings of the Buddha give you clarity and calm in the midst of human striving, there is room for you here. If Gaia's seasonal rhythms lead you best through the myriad steps of life's dance, there is room for you here. If the still mysterious capacity and power of the mind stirs your imagination and quickens your pulse, there is room for you here. Rest now, besides that spring, wherever it is for you, and let your attention go to the small places inside or out in the great wide world, places or people in need of healing, or for which your heart is filled with thanksgiving. And in that spirit, let us be silent together for a time.
Because we love one another, we honor each individual's spiritual journey. We celebrate life's abundance and service to each other, our community, and the world. We connect with each other in love, respect, and acceptance. Thus do we covenant together.
And now in Spanish. Porque nos amamos uno al otro, honoramos el viaje espiritual de cada individuo. Celebramos la abundancia de la vida en el servicio a entre sí, nuestra comunidad y el mundo. Ponemos en contacto a unos con otros en el amor, respeto y acepción, así que hacemos pacto.
At this time in the service, we take time to share what is in our hearts and on our minds. If your heart is heavy today, know that you do not have to carry your burden alone. Your heartache is a shared sorrow. A shared sorrow is a sorrow halved. Please share your sorrows publicly by posting them in the Zoom chat or send them to our Facebook Messenger or speak them aloud.
When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love when I breathe in. I breathe in peace when I breathe out. I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love.
This Sunday, like every Sunday, we reaffirm our promise to one another. Our promise makes clear the call to celebrate. For that which brings you joy, makes you grateful, brings you peace, we, your sacred community, celebrate. We celebrate together and magnify joy, heighten gratitude, and spread ever-increasing peace. Please share your joys publicly by posting them in the Zoom chat or send them to our Facebook Messenger or speak them aloud.
Spirit of light, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirs of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots hold me close, wings set me free, Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
We've all heard the term enlightenment, but it can seem as though it means something different to everyone. For the mystic, it is a personal journey to discovering your true self. To the philosopher, it may be a point of personal freedom and the ability to reason. For the Jungian psychologist, it is a point at which you can hold the tensions of the opposites and integrate your trauma so you can find a way to move on. Today, I'll give a brief idea and history of each while applying them to our current social and political circumstances. On the surface, they may seem different, but they all represent one core need for change. Although the history of Enlightenment concepts go back to ancient civilizations, we will look primarily at the history that most affects how we ended up here in this time and space. We'll start with philosophy and the period of enlightenment that took place in the 17th century. While the first to consider the role of enlightenment in government was Thomas Hobbes, who wrote Leviathan in 1651, his contribution was not as significant as some who came after him as far as our own government, but he was an instigator of the movement. He also first introduced the concept of the social contract between the government and the governed. Although he advocated for a strong autocratic government, he paved the way for the philosophers such as John Locke, who lived from 1632 to 1704. Locke believed people could improve themselves through experiences, and that everyone was born with three basic rights consisting of life, liberty, and property. He also believed that if the government fails to provide these things, it should be overthrown. Locke also was the impetus for the concepts of freedom of the press, educational reform, and religious tolerance. From Voltaire, we get the ideas of religion, freedom of religion, tolerance, and freedom of speech. His words, "I do not agree with the word you say, but will defend to the death your right to say it." This quote was used by the ACLU when they agreed to represent the Ku Klux Klan in 1979 in a right to protest, and again approximately a decade ago when they wanted to adopt a highway. One of the philosophers who was most instrumental in forming our Constitution, as well as both the French and American revolutions, was Montesquieu. His philosophy lay in the belief that there should be a division of power, as in the legislative, judicial, and executive branches, so there would be a checks and balances to the government. He also put forth the idea that if the government should fail in this or in the separation of church and state, the governed had a right to overthrow it. Rousseau called the relationship between the governed and the government a social contract, taking from Hobbes, but put the power of it behind the governed. This period in history is also known as the Age of Reason, because by and large these philosophers believed that everything could and should be worked out logically. They were also deists and thought that God exists. He created the world with humanity and left us to manage on our own. While these ideals were fantastic ideas in the beginning, it would later become problematic in the formation of the democratic republic we currently have. Not all people were considered when inalienable rights were given. It resulted in decades and centuries of a gradual shift toward a capitalist-based system where corporations decided who was provided these rights. Once landowners and the wealthy were given priority in how the government was run, the republic was inevitably doomed. This was significant in the destruction of the Roman Empire and will eventually, I believe, lead to the destruction of our own government. Somewhere along the line, the ideals of the democracy were lost, and the only way to get back to a true democracy is to allow every person to have a voice in how we're governed. In other words, to stop the division and find a common ground upon which to build a new form of administration. More on that soon. The mystical religious concept of enlightenment was something of a blend between the Buddhist and Gnostic. Yes, it's far more ancient and complicated than that, but to go further, we would need several hours, so please bear with me. The reality is the Eastern philosophers are so varied that it would require a long thesis to come to basically the same place of spiritual oneness with the universe. Also, both the Gnostic traditions and Eastern philosophies influenced one another. The Gnostics taught that humanity has descended from the upper heavens into the bottom or nether regions of the world, the underworld. They called it Kenoma, or the Matrix. To return from where we came, we must undo, as much as possible, the trauma, wounds, and beliefs that were added to our subconscious on the way down. In the Gnostic tradition, this is referred to as shadow work. As with many spiritual teachings today, this shadow work is essential to our ability to reach enlightenment. Because we are created from energy and vibration, We each have a choice as to whether we will transcend our shadows and move beyond the trauma or not. How much we can't transmute will determine our existence in the afterlife. It's interesting to note that Jesus was part of the Gnostic community, and there is evidence that he had also been involved in Buddhism and may have spent his lost years in India, as well as, which is likely why the two groups hold similarities. The Christianity prior to the meeting of the Nicene Council looked much different than in the rigid beliefs of today. Regardless, a Chinese proverb sums up what the Gnostic view of enlightenment is, as well as a journey towards Zen and Dharma. He who blames others has a long way to go on his journey. He who blames himself is halfway there. He who blames no one has arrived. As we leave behind the blame, we realize that higher spiritual power is at work and we are part of it all. What we do in our own inner work is translated to the collective mass. Only then can we stop othering people and come together as one. This belief also holds that no one ever completely transcends their shadows. They work on them until their soul decides it's time to go home. So if someone claims to be enlightened and experiencing only positive feelings, they are denying there's still work to do subconsciously. Thus we end up with the toxic positive personality. While the philosophers focused on the political climate, the Gnostics focused on the internal spiritual well-being, which brings us to psychology and Carl Jung. Jungian psychology arrived around the same time as Freud, but focused less on the mother and more on the inner child and the archetypes. Again, a very long, complicated topic that fascinates me, but would keep us here for hours. Jung's focus on enlightenment was very similar to the Gnostics' view that he talked a great deal about the shadow self. However, Jung wrote that what he called the tension of the opposites. We are born with two sides. One is our angry, egoic self. The other, our compassionate, loving soul. To become enlightened, we must be able to hold the tension between the two by acknowledging both and being ruthlessly honest with ourselves. It is through this process that forgiveness becomes possible and the path toward finding balance occurs. In the podcast called The Jungian Life on TuneIn, they use the example of the Amish children who were killed in the classroom at the West Nickel Mines School on October 2nd, 2006. Rather than hold their anger, the parents of the children made a conscious decision to find that place of forgiveness. They did so by confronting and acknowledging that part of themselves and were able to embrace the family of the killer to mourn as one. It is understood that they too lost someone they loved when the killer committed suicide. On the other side of that, Jung believed that chaos and destruction served a purpose. It is often only through destruction that the shadow becomes visible, since it resides in the mass and personal subconscious. So one could say that both Trump and Putin serve a purpose in unmasking that shadow. The very fact they are beginning to be held accountable, and it is an action toward integrating the shadow work on a worldwide scale. In fact, there are people who support these men because they understand that this is their purpose. However, it is becoming obvious that many of these supporters have not yet begun to deal with their own subconscious shadows when they persist and protest the accountability that's taking place. So where does this information take us in terms of discovering enlightenment? We learned that our government has taken the path of extremes, and this cannot continue unless we find a way to use reconciliation and listen to one another a democracy is not viable. We must provide everyone with basic human rights, such as housing and food. The Universal Human Rights document created by the UN mentions 30 basic human rights, and it should be our goal and become an international law. Therefore, I do see a potential in the mass consciousness for a one-world government once the dust of destruction is settled. It is entirely plausible that the division, racism, homophobia, and other forms of hatred are a result of the world's collective shadow. We must find a way to integrate that shadow to move forward. The shadow includes the trauma of the generation that came before, as well as the trauma of the generations currently alive. When we heal ourselves, we also heal our parents and children. This belief is backed up by science and the observation of DNA changes noted in a family history of trauma. I've written a little bit about this on my blog, theafterbash.com, and will be digging deeper into it as I have time. One of the best examples of what happens when you begin to deal with your shadow self and influence the world is what is happening in Ukraine right now. In any previous war, the angry, bitter part of the collective has taken over and led to world war. I don't see that happening here. Rather, I see two countries dealing with their collective shadow. Yes, Putin is an instigator of the war, but he is obviously losing. His soldiers are getting bogged down in unusual weather, which is possibly an indication that nature is also part of the mass consciousness. His troops are defecting, and those in his closest circle are walking away. Russian citizens are taking to the streets in protest despite being threatened with a long jail term. Soon he will be isolated, and I suspect someone in his own circle will put an end to his misery, or he will be tried for war crimes in an international court. At the same time, Ukraine, a country that has historically been a victim of the Soviet regime, is rising and declaring its freedom from oppression. Jung was once asked if he believed there would be a nuclear war. His response was that it depended upon how many people were able to hold the tension of opposites. I think we're witnessing a huge number of people doing that very thing. Spiritually, this is the end times that was discussed in the Bible, and the signs are all around us. But prophecies are not absolute truths. They depend on the free will to determine the result. So they are actually probabilities. It does not appear as though the world will end. That potential only existed unless a certain amount of humanity did not decide to do the difficult work of dealing with their trauma and integrating it to reach transcendence. Those who do not participate in the collective healing will simply choose to leave at one point or another. Assuming reincarnation, they will return until they have done their shadow work. Some also believe that it will be the enlightened ones who will disappear into the fifth dimension and create a new earth there. Although, as physicists learn more about the connection between consciousness and the physical world, I'm inclined to believe that the new world mentioned in the Bible exists here, but in a higher vibratory dimension. Still, this belief does exist largely in the realm of faith. In conclusion, all three paths of enlightenment indicate that the choice to participate is entirely personal and must start in the personal soul. We already know that any change for the better starts with a small group of people who believe in a positive potential. I wish for you all health, happiness, and security. But first, I wish for you the courage to be brutally honest about who you are, within so we can be brutally honest about who we are as participants in a better world, free from slavery, hate, and oppression. Namaste.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
Today, as you make your pledge or offering to support this community, let the words of Heather Christensen inspire you to generosity. Individually and together, Unitarian Universalism is a grand vision of a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. That vision is embodied in a few large congregations, numerous mid-sized congregations, and many, many small congregations. No matter its size, every congregation depends on each of its members. Each one of you, by your commitment of time, energy, and resources, helps make that grand vision real. Individually and together, we are Unitarian Universalists, building a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy.
I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. De Tio recibo, a ti te doy, así compartimos y vivimos hoy. Receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. De Tio recibo, a ti te doy, así compartimos y vivimos hoy.
Be Present by Elena Westbrook. Let every moment be a prayer. With every sip of tea, let your lips move in thanksgiving. Be fully present to every stroke of the hairbrush, every cup of milk you pour for the children. Be present without judgment or regret, without plans or expectations, and every moment becomes a prayer.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Extinguimos esta llama, pero no la luz de la verdad, el calor de comunidad o el fuego de nuestro compromiso. Estos los llevaremos en el corazón hasta que estemos juntos otra vez.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes